Cool. Hi. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, we're starting with our base text, which is extractor notes for ethics. And today's session, is all going to be about quotes and mythological references, which you can use either in the quotes as an introduction or as the conclusion to basically give that X factor edge to your answer. Now, my assumption is that people who've already studied for the 2026 mains or who were in process of completing, fine tuning their answer writing skills, you know that these are 8 core micro themes for ethics. What we will do is, as in as much detail as we can in this session, would be pick up some of the PYQs, and I'm going to assume that you know the body, basic structure of what the body is going to be. But we're going to embellish that with a quote which is most relevant to both the implicit and the explicit demand of that question. So, कितने लोग हैं? Cool, 6 लोग हैं. Right, I'll wait for like 10 more minutes, not 10 minutes. I'll wait for 2-3 minutes, but I'll give you the essence of what we do today would be this. We will be attempting at writing a one liner for all the thinkers and philosophers and statesmen that we've come across so that you remember them. The problem with ethics paper is not that the paper is hard. The questions are pretty simple. They are very commonsensical in a way that, अगर आप normal बातें करोगे किसी से, you will automatically give the right answer. The problem which you face, and it's the same problem that you face in essays where you write a paragraph and you write an argument, is sometimes you don't know the mechanism which is at play. When you do not know the mechanism, two things happen. One, you will use a thinker, but you will misuse one of his or her quotes. And second, if there's an opportunity to make a right diagram, you sometimes won't be able to recall it in the exam. So, मान के चलो, these NYQ sessions which are happening on YouTube Live, which are taken by me, Shikhar Sir, Purnima ma'am, are only to give you the closest X factor idea on how to score more marks, given that such themes are recurring more and more in the UPSC mains. Okay. How many of you who've joined me live are from the Letter and Spirit group? Just a yes would do. How many of you have just happened to just bounce on the channel? How many of you are writing mains in 2026? That would be enough for me to know कि किस level का ये जाना चाहिए. Okay. Now, you've read the ethical theory. That's the assumption. So basically, you know mota mota about ethics, moral laws, rules, and conscience, and what their interplay is. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to take two questions. One, is conscience a more reliable guide when compared to laws, rules, and regulations in the context of ethical decision making? Discuss. And second question we'll take is, in case of a crisis of conscience, does emotional intelligence help to overcome the same without compromising the ethical or moral stand? Discuss. I don't know about you, but sometimes what happens is, even for me, that these words sometimes have a very close intersection with each other, or these questions become so verbose that unless until you have clarity of where you're going to fit what, it becomes difficult to effectively use a quote. So we'll go through these questions easily one by one. Okay? We'll first take this one. Is conscience a more reliable guide when compared to laws, rules, and regulation in the context of ethical decision making? This question is kind of creating a tension, or basically putting these two things at opposite ends to each other. Conscience at one end, which is a very personal thing, and on the other end, it's putting rules, laws, and regulation, which are very tangible things that you can see. And the question is that, is it a more reliable guide when you need to take care of these things in the context of ethical decision making? ठीक है, अब ये याद रखना. I'm not going to take to the body of this question, but a great person to invoke here is Gandhi. And Gandhi ji ki ek bahut hi famous quote hai, and which you should note if you have a pen and paper. There is a higher court than the court of justice, and that is the court of conscience. Okay, if you start your answer with this quote, that there is a higher court than the court of justice, and that is the court of conscience, this quote doesn't make conscience win over justice. It basically is just saying the court of conscience is higher. It's like an appealing authority, appellate authority. Your first grind is to the court of justice, through the rules, regulation, etc., etc. Okay, what's Gandhi is saying, that there's an order to things. So whenever you are stuck, whenever there is a case which presents, and if you are, let's say, the DM, or you're in the place of judge, whenever you're there and you realize that ये जो particular case है, this cannot be solved by old case laws or old rules and regulations. There is something unique about this. That is the time when your conscience can take precedence. Okay, so Gandhi in that way over here is saying that, and I'm giving you the formula. An examined conscience is greater than laws. But laws are still greater than unexamined conscience. Unexamined conscience, ये हो गया आपके mob lynching and all those other things, which is just happening because of a mob mentality or happening because of a rogue behavior, which people start justifying. Okay, I hope you understand this. That this is the sequence that you need to understand at the core of your heart. Gandhi's quote is very important. Gandhi says that in an exam that higher than the court of law or the court of justice is the court of conscience. That should be like your opening quote. When that becomes your opening quote, then automatically your body will follow through. ठीक है, तुम्हारे body में automatically वो सब points आ ही जाएंगे अपने आप, which you have to then expand. So the formula that you write is this: examined conscience is greater than laws is greater than unexamined conscience. In a way, you've not said one is greater than another. You've just given the sequence to things. ठीक है, अब let me take this opportunity to tell you कि one more question that we do, which kind of will solidify this understanding. Second question: in case of crisis of conscience, does emotional intelligence help to overcome the same without compromising the ethical or moral stand? Let's say you did this. Let's say there is a case which is unique, which has come, and you realize कि यार इस पे I cannot mindlessly apply the old rules and old laws. I have to take a call here, and that call now has to come from my conscience. Okay, now you're in that situation. You're in a fix. In that fix, which is, hey, let's call it the crisis of conscience. In that crisis of conscience, if you have emotional intelligence versus if you don't, these two scenarios, इसमें if you have it, does it help you to overcome this crisis of conscience without compromising the ethical or moral stand? Now it's a crucial question. This basically says कि emotional intelligence, is it a capacity? जैसे कि IQ होती है ना, IQ is your capacity to analyze things well. Emotional intelligence is basically your capacity to hold two different views and still not lose your ground, right? We all know the Daniel Goleman ka emotional intelligence ke all the parameters, but at the end of the day, emotional intelligence is about holding two dissenting or two opposite opinions and still retain your ability to function. The more you have, the more you can actually put this into execution, the more resilient you are emotionally. The question is, if you have EI, will you be better able to resolve the crisis of conscience? That's the critical question. Okay? And there is another interesting quote which comes here, which is from Viktor Frankl. So Viktor Frankl, I hope you all know, is the guy who is the creator of the logotherapy. He has a very famous quote which you should write in your answers whenever possible, that between the stimulus and response, there's a space. And it is in that space wherein lies our power to choose a response. So some event happened to you, and this is the stimulus, like this is you, the event happened, it reached you, and now you have two options. Either you can react, or you can, in your head, like just take a step back and create this space. In this space lies your response. This space you can only create if you have emotional intelligence, if you're emotionally resilient. Okay, if you are not emotionally resilient, if you do not have a high EI or EQ, high EQ, then you will not be able to create this space. Then you will just be reacting to whatever stimulus comes. So stimulus comes, it'll take your reaction. Your reaction will hit this, another stimulus comes, you'll react again. Now you're in a situation where your conscience need to act because the laws have failed. Okay, your conscience need to give you a signal. And let's say you do not have the EI, तो बिल्कुल नहीं कर पाओगे. But अगर EI है, मान लो emotional intelligence है, will it only help? Is it enough to help you to navigate through those moral and ethical dilemmas? Now this answer is tricky, and this is where most of you guys would miss it. The answer is tricky because EI or emotional intelligence only gives you the space इस स्पेस के दो इश्यूज हो जाते हैं, ठीक है. एंड लेट मी ड्रॉ डायग्राम सो दैट यू नो दिस मेक्स सेंस. Whenever there is a crisis of conscience, let's say, and let's say it passes through an emotional intelligent person. Let's say you have the emotional intelligence, which just basically means that you will get all the variables, you'll have all the ideas which are coming to you, but you will be able to hold your ground. Let's say you're able to hold your ground. Ab only two things are possible. Either that space will enable you to point to clarity, or it will give you the space to seek your comfort. Either you will act on the courage which that situation demands, or you will very easily tilt towards the comfort, wherein you will just rationalize the situation ki yaar kuch nahi ho sakta. I mean, it's very sad that it's happening, but I cannot act on this because my other vested interest will get lost, and so that's kind of bad. So EI as a whole is a neutral space. So the answer to this question will presume that कि जो तुम्हारे इनिशियल वेक्टर्स है ना, जो तुम्हारे इनिशियल कैरेक्टर वेक्टर्स हैं, जिनको वर्च्यूज कहते हैं, they would have already decided आप इस सिचुएशन में क्या करोगे. EI has just given you the space to synthesize that together and now either act towards the clarity, wherein you take the discomfort but you still do what needs to be done depending upon the character, the virtue, the traits that you had. नहीं तो EI, if this is bad, if these character traits are bad, then EI will give you the space, that kind of a patience, and will make you go towards the comfort, where you will rationalize whatever resolution you take. Rationalize is in a negative connotation right now. It basically means that I can justify anything wrong, and now with a complete calm and smug face, right? So this is where this questions इसका जो depth है ना वो यहाँ पे आता है. In case of crisis of conscience, does emotional intelligence help to overcome the same without compromising the ethical or moral stand? It's half there, half there. Emotional intelligence only provides you the space in which you synthesize the dissenting opinions or the two different voices or the two different options, whatever. But your core character traits define where you're going to go. If those character traits go towards courage and doing what is right for the sake of doing what is right, then EI will give you further clarity and it will kind of enable you to do that. If your core character traits are save your own behind, go towards the comfortable mean, then आप उल्टा करोगे, ठीक है. And this is to be on the safe side. Ab, I hope this is making sense to people. Am I making sense to everyone who's watching? Let me know if you want me to go fast, slow. What we are trying to do here is we'll just pick up a few questions from the PYQs across these ethics themes, and we'll just keep giving quotes. In those quotes, I will try to explain why is that quote an X factor quote. Okay. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll take a small digression towards the theory. I can avoid that digression also. Those are like classes, foundation classes के level के direct digressions, but sometimes it just makes sense कि अगर इतना समझ में आ गया तो you go the extra mile. Let me know if the 8 people watching this makes sense. Now we'll take a minor digression here and I'll draw this matrix. It's easy to visualize things on a graph to understand क्या चल रहा है. Let's say this is your character. Okay. And this is your competence. जहाँ पे EI की बात हो रही है अभी. So this is EI, which is the competence. So, general the way quadrants work is this is low, this is low, this is high, and this is also high. Okay. This is the best zone to be in, where your character is high and you have high EQ. You are always going to make great decisions. In fact, the more space you're able to get for yourself between the stimulus and your reaction and your response, the better your decisions would be, because you'll be coming from a high character or high virtues. Okay. If your character is low, and your EI is also low, likely you will never be in charge of any leadership position. Okay. So you'll be like very clumsy. Agar ho bhi gaye. Or if you try to do anything bad, you'll be caught. So the system will catch you because you have low EQ, you have low competence, you'll be caught very easily. There will be overall no issue with the system. If your character is trait is high, but your EQ is low, then again you will tend to be clumsy. You will do the right thing, but sometimes you might need saving. So you'll be like an additional burden sometimes to your own department when things get tough. Someone else will have to come and save you, but that person will be rest assured that you would not be doing something unethical. But if you are on this zone, that you have high EQ and you're very low in character, then boss, this is a rare zone jahan pe ye wala part in a quadrant is bad. Then you would be the master manipulator. This is like the most, I mean, you can give me examples from the history, but if you're on the right side, this is your zone, and you can draw this diagram whenever you feel like. Master manipulator. Okay, people should be afraid of you. Or most of the demagogues, most of these rabble rousers, most of these smooth abuser kind of personalities, they're in this zone. They're so calm, collected, so measured in their responses that they'll give you a sense of absolute confidence and absolute control and command over what the situation is. But they're coming from all negative character traits, and by negative I mean all things which are not good for society. They might still justify it. That's the rationalization which this mind will work, but that's not going to help anyway. So coming back to our core thing, this is how you go about understanding a particular theme and a few questions, right? So these two questions are in pair, so I took them together. Up, let's go towards some of the quotes. So those of you who are preparing for 26, we're going to write the mains. These are the X factor notes and these are the quotes. Now you can just, an easy thing is just keep reading these quotes almost every second or third day, and I hope that some of them will stick with you when you go write the paper. Or try to understand things in this level of depth. Try to understand the break point of every question, every keyword. It's almost like a mini essay, like a 150 word ho gaya na, so 1200, like 1/8 of an essay. In that 1/8 part, you have to give a quote for a dimension which is asked in the question and give an example. That's it. That's it. You close. You would have seen all rankers, at least all the top 50 rankers, they heavily rely on quotes to talk about what they mean. They'll Marshall, Potter Stewart, or Lao Tzu, Aristotle, whenever they have to, Gandhi, Plato, whenever they feel like, and they'll use them well. So their answer will be much differentiated from every other answer, which is largely a definition based answer. So if you're not going through this rigor, your answer will likely tend to be a definition first answer. And definitions are good to know, but only useful when a question has directly asked you a definition. If the question is not asking about a definition, it's asking you to analyze, discuss, elucidate, etc., etc., then writing 3 lines of definition is doing you no good, nothing at all. उससे better है कि quotes को master करो. So this is what we use. The codes of conscience are higher than the code of law, and we are rephrasing things. Okay, to see what is right and not to do it is lack of courage. You will see these. You will see the philosophy of these thinkers across generation of Greek, Roman, and Oriental philosophers. Let me see if there's anything good worth knowing. Okay, and have a mix of both Indian and Western philosophers in your question, in your answers. And also we'll take some mythological ideas, but they'll be largely from Mahabharata, and largely they'll be referencing Gita, which is probably the a text which you can widely use and refer. Okay, cool. So we go from this on to the next one. I'll take a session on civil servants, and we'll try to have a better variety of civil servants which are less cliche and less used, so that your answers can be differentiated. But now let's come to this. Normative ethics, deontology versus teleology. How many of you guys have prepared this? How many of you guys have written any of these PYQs? If you have, and if you've used any quote, please share your quote on the chat. So this is a classic means versus end debate. And normally we think that you have to either choose means or the end. Okay. But your maturity lies in how you synthesize these two things together in a way that the tension is still there, but the tension is now hedged on one side because of the context of the question. समझ में आ रही है? It's very easy for me to say, just look at the binary, right? It's easy for me to say end justify the means. Okay, I'll be talking like a utilitarian guy in the sense, if utilitarian philosophy, when it says that पांच को बचाने के लिए एक को मारना है ना, और कोई और तरीका नहीं है, तो पांच को बचाने के लिए इसको मार दो, because the end is justifying the means. The means is that you had to push the lever and the train will ram this guy and the five will be saved. Purely on the side of means, the debate would be that, जैसे गांधी जी ने बोला, right, कि the seed of your act will determine the kind of tree which comes and the future value of the tree and the whole ecosystem. So inherent in the means is the quality of the end. You might win in the short term, but you will lose in the long term. Okay. And then you can quote Keynes and say in the long term all of us are dead. So these discussions keep going on. These binary repartees, these binary back and forth, they keep going on. And you are a bureaucrat or aspiring to be a bureaucrat. You have to take a decision on the ground. ठीक है, not keep theorizing in your head. So एक बहुत प्यारे philosopher आते हैं, let me just look up a name. I think his name is Michael Walzer. So I'm just jumping fast on this means versus end debate. Michael Walzer says that before you start to go through with your execution, determine what the end should be according to the righteous principle or according to whatever principle you're operating with, right? In a way that determine what is the dharma in this situation, to say in Indian context, right? And then from point A, where you're right now theorizing what is the right thing to do, till the point B, where actually that right thing will be done, completed, there'll come parts here where you'll have to take some shady actions, right? You will take some actions which you will not be able to wholly justify. And independently, if you look at those actions, we'll call you like some kind of a miscreant, some kind of a, you're playing shady. And case in point is Bhagavad Gita and, the Mahabharata, right? Krishna or, Pandav give all the options to the Kaurav that, just give us the 5 gaon, ye, vagera, vagera, and we'll just live with that, vagera, vagera. We'll leave our, whatever is our just birthright on the kingdom. But then Kaurav said, no, we're not going to do that. Then Pandav go for the war. Even in the war, Arjun tells Krishna, I'm not going to fight the war. And Krishna convinces him that, you're on the side of Dharma because we tried everything. So now you have to fight the war. And then you all know that for Krishna and Pandavas as a whole, to kill each and every of those Kaurav princes and, their senapatis, the things that were done were, obviously, they were not as clean as one would have hoped to be, especially if you're coming from the side of Bhagwan and all that thing. But those things had to be done because the final aim had to be achieved. The only thing Michael Walzer says here that, and it's a tricky thing, it's that when a good leader takes those calls, take those calls which are morally tainted, there's bound to be a residue of moral guilt with that guy, even when he wins, right? So picture Yudhishthir, who whenever Krishna would come to him and say, hey, you know what, like Duryodhan, not Duryodhan, what was that, Dronacharya, right? So Dronacharya has to be killed, and so you have to say a half lie. And now Yudhishthira is like, nahi yaar, you know what, he will count on me to tell him the exact truth. And Krishna is like, yeah, you can just say that Ashwathama mara gaya, and then the moment you're going to give the exact statement, I'll just bring in the couch shell, and that's it. It'll be that your truth, I'll cover it with the din of the noise, right? And Yudhishthira is like, every time he knew that this is not the right thing or this is not the thing to do, but this had to be done. There were some times, when tempers will flare. Abhimanyu, the way he was killed, and so these guys killed Karn in a way which was less than desired. But every time this happened, there was a moral residue, or there was a residue of moral guilt, which Pandavas took, which is what happened to them when they went for the final, hike towards the Mount Everest and towards the Swarg, each or not Swarg, they didn't know they were going for Swarg, but when they took the final hike, each of them kept dropping because of whatever they did, because of whatever faults they had, right? So in a way, in a large scheme of things, it gets taken care of. But Michael Wasner said that they're instrumentally, the righteous cause will also make you come across with decisions which would be not correct, which would be instrumentally wrong. Take those, because that's the inevitability of a leadership position. That is one way in which you solve the means versus end debate properly here. Okay, this is the final answer. This guy is still, he's a living philosopher. So this theory is as latest as it can get. But before that, Kant ki theory thi, and Kant said, this logic, right? Act only as you would will all to act. Matlab, whatever you do, if you feel like this way everyone should act and it should become a universal law, then you act like that. Otherwise, do not act at any cost. Which basically means that if you have decided that I will never lie, no matter what, right? Then even if, let's say, your friend, someone's come to kill your friend and he asks you kahan pe hai, then you should point out in the direction, because never lie is your dictum and you should live by it, come, no matter what. इसमें वॉल्जर का आइडिया अलग है, ठीक है? इसमें there is another middle path which comes, which is another interesting diagram that you may draw if it comes to that, and that is that's the case of reversibility of actions. So you took a means and you kind of know it's not the best means. I mean, I would not want it to become a universal law, but in this context, if I take this particular means, whatever end, because end will get shaped by the means, end is still not dire end. Okay, I can still reverse it. I can still reverse a decision. I can try from a different means. If you can take a judgment call on that, then end की तरफ ये debate झुक जाती है. Then end justify the means हो जाता है. As long as the means are reversible, as long as the situation is reversible, your end can justify the means. This balance of the scale will tilt towards the end. Okay, you understand this? I'm going to stop for a moment just to see all the people here. If wherever you think I'm moving ahead or I'm moving faster than what you can comprehend, let me know. But what I'm trying to appeal to are people who are going to write this exam in 26, so that all you need to know are theorists, philosophers, whose single line quote you can use in your exam and get the right introduction, right? So there are two answers to the means versus end debate. One answer is the answer of moral residue. Okay, which would be here. Let me just see. Okay, have we not given it on our... We would have given Michael Wasner also, but one is that, other is the age-old Kantian dilemma. Okay, this is Kant. Utilitarianism we discussed. Nishkam karma is like the Indian answer, that you do not anyway, you have no control over the end, so you just have to take care of the means. Okay, just take care of the means, and if your means are for a dharmic thing, then do whatever it is to achieve that end. Then you would have these kind of things. Okay, moral relativism, righteousness depends upon the cultural and situational context, right? You have all kinds of gray areas beach mein where you can use that. Whenever you have to put in your answer that we have to take the context of a particular society segment of people, so ye sare keywords le aana. Again, slippery slope. Use these keywords as ethical terms to justify whatever it is that you want to put it on the paper. Rather than using a lot of sentences, rather than using a very big sentence, use terms like slippery slope. Okay. This is what we discussed. This is what would give Yudhishthir that moral residue. Even when he won that particular day of battle, he was still, kind of under guilt. See the Gandhi Dandi March, right? He was breaking a salt law. which is a law written on the paper, approved by the parliament, whatever, right? But his resistance was morally right, given the larger society context in which he was acting. अब यहाँ पे this becomes subjective. This thing, Gandhi had Choi Chora. So we discussed, right, that are your actions reversible or not? The Choi Chora incident was not reversible, right? It happened, people died, right? And so Gandhi stopped his revolution there because, according to even his dilemma or any observer's dilemma, also, it was done and dusted. Now your revolution is tainted with blood. That cannot be reversed. It could well be a case where you are discussing with your enemy, right? Or you're in bed with your enemy, as they say, right? You're trying to have a larger diplomatic parley with your enemy, extends to 2-3 days when people are still dying, but you think, I can still maybe convince that person to do it in the way I wanted. But after 3 days also, that those negotiations broke. So it's still reversible. Now you can also, now the second part of your team can still go and do the violent attack. But you tried, right? So ye means this means of diplomatic parley from day 1 to day 3, which resulted in extra number of killings, or of not killings, let's say extra days of blockade, is still reversible because now you'll achieve your end with the other means. Ye still permissible hai, but Chora Chora incident pe Gandhi ji pulled back. Okay, cool. So are we good? I will stop the moment I see, either less enthusiasm, which I'm seeing right now, or when I see that you guys, it's getting heavy for you guys. So let me know. We can come back to these things again and again. There's one more thinker which is worth, noting, and that thinker will come again and again. That philosopher will come again and again. That is Aristotle. And Aristotle had a very famous love for something called as practical wisdom. He's like, all these theorizing, all this sophism is cool, but the moment shit hits the fan, the moment you're out there on the ground, the wisdom which actually helps you there is called phronesis, which is nothing but practical wisdom. And Aristotle, because these guys were writing philosophies for aristocrats and leaders and warriors, they said that this kind of wisdom is cultivated more through experience, more through reflection, more through on the ground stuff. Okay, this cannot be taught in classrooms. And so with this experience or this kind of wisdom, whatever answer comes, you tilt towards that side because that is the wisdom of the road, or that's the wisdom of the state. You have seen this thing happening multiple time and again. You're not chasing a random idealistic world. You're basically trying to do good to the people. And now you're armed with this kind of wisdom. Use the practical one. So use this term. It's called phronesis. Okay. Cool. Now, in this module, ethics, cross consequences and determinants, in this thing, there's one important thinker that you need to know. Okay. And that thinker, and most of you would know, but that thinker is, you need to know this thinker back of your head. Okay. That guy's name is Kohlberg. And the beauty of these modern day thinkers is that they break the whole mechanism down to the parts. So that they're able to pinpoint exactly where is the thing breaking, right? So, you'll get questions like, ethics encompass several key dimensions crucial in guiding individuals and organizations towards a morally responsible behavior. Okay. Explain the key dimensions and how they shape ethical reasoning or ethical decision making. Now, this question is a verbose question. Okay. What it's kind of trying to tell you is that as humans, and it's commonsensical that we follow herd mentality more than we go for the ideal questions or ideal things, right? So Kohlberg divided these things into three. He called this your moral development, and commonsensical hai, but just that he broke it down to three, which makes it easier to diagnose. One is called pre-conventions. which basically means the rules and your punishments of not following those rules. This is like going by the books. Okay. Second is called conventional, which is mostly the social signaling, your workplace ethos. And third is post. Okay. Now your training can at best help you develop these two things at best. Okay. And this is something where a good leader walks the talk. So if you're talking about not taking corruption money, but you see that corruption is becoming a silent undercurrent in your department, and if you're someone who's now not taking or not even partaking into corruption, like sidestepping, you're looked as an outlier, and that's you going against the convention. And when you go against the convention of your particular society, office structure, or whatever it is, you're flagged. When you're flagged, then your voice will not be heard. Worse, that they would want you to be pushed out. Okay, so this is where majority of walk the talk happens. Plus, leader determines the okay behaviors to do. Right? There is a very famous proverb which says Caesar's wife should be above suspicion. And I think, I don't remember which text, but in Indian text, I think at the time of Yudhishthir, there was this, back then that society, there were the punishments were different according to your level in the society. So for the same act, for the same wrongdoing, a higher ranked official would get, severe beatings, or a harsher punishment than what a lower ranked official or an aam admi would get, right? So if you are higher ranked official, if you are higher in the society, if you, let's say, you're from the priest class or warrior class, it's not expected from you to fail in certain things, in certain moral and societal obligation. If you're from a lower category and you're grappling with daily roti kapda makan ke things, then it's still fine. You'll be educated once. You will still be punished, but that punishment will be in accordance with the station that you hold in that society. So these are like decent egalitarian laws, right? This is the convention thing. Now if you're in a place right, where the convention is that चलता है यार, करप्शन वरप्शन चलता है, ज़्यादा मत करो, इस लेवल तक करो तो ठीक है, then it's gone for a toss. It's only this post convention thinkers or people in bureaucracy, people like Ashok Khemka, TN Session, people who understand these two things completely, yet their voice of conscience is not derived from either the rules, which are the negative enforcers. Rules are negative enforcers, right? If you disobey or if you do not follow the rule, you'll get a punishment. It's clean as day, easy and simple, right? Or this, the silent yes, here I'm not doing anything wrong, this is as per convention. Only those people who are beyond these two, who derive their inner compass, their inner voice beyond the societal and beyond the written law, are the people who can actually effectuate a change. So fine, so this makes sense, right? Now, this being the truth, you have to design your policies, and you will get these questions wherein it's not just the information, it's not just the knowledge which is imparted to you, but also lessons have to be put in case for this and this to rise up, right? Mostly field visits, mostly sensitization with the ground realities, mostly exposure to good case studies, right? Exposure to best practices across the cultures. These are the things when when you listen to your conscience voice more than what you would listen to the bad convention that is going in your workplace. Okay, cool. अब यहाँ पे एक फिलोसफर और याद आता है, that is चाणक्य और कौटिल्य, and he has just one statement to give, not one statement but just one keyword to give: yogakshema. Yogakshema is a very interesting Indian word which basically translates to two. One is yog is to have or to join, to have basically, and shame is to keep, right? According to Kautilya, according to Chanakya, a good ruler is one who can get things for his praja and then make sure that they are ground so that those things continue. The good things continue in perpetuity. Not only do you have to hunt the right thing for your people, but you also need to have the ability to keep it, right? So if you fail in any of these things, it's gone. You might, if you fail in the yoga kshema second part, it's gone, right? So such should be the reserves, and such should be the thinking as a bureaucrat, that you have to apply this kind of a thinking. And if you want to give a modern example, in the modern constitution, the equivalent is directive principles, okay? Because that silent corruption, which kind of erodes the public trust very, very slowly but definitively, that goes against the principle of Yogakshema, right? So you've done something good, you have a democracy, you have heard people's voices, you have participation, but the corruption of any kind, financial, moral, societal, all kinds of corruption will just chip away from that thing. And that is anti-Yogakshema principle. Okay. Now we come to this crucial part, ethical dilemma. Ethical dilemmas are interesting because these are the tensions between two goods. अगर life में there's a tension between one thing which is good and one thing which is bad, तो tension बस ये कि I don't have the courage to act on the good. That's the only tension, that if I'm going to act on the side of the good, I might just lose something from me. That's the only tension. But the moment where the tension is on doing something, like trading this one good for the another good, that is where the ethical dilemmas come. Okay, let's take two questions on this. Besides domain knowledge, let's just take one. Besides domain knowledge, a public official needs innovativeness and creativity of a higher order as well while resolving ethical dilemmas. Discuss with a suitable example. Okay, do you understand, right? This one. And why do you need innovativeness and creativity? Because those tensions are unique. Because those tensions are asking you to choose between one good over the other good. Okay. Now, the precursor to having the ability, or precursor to apply innovativeness and creativity, is your emotional intelligence. The same thing again. So there's a famous quote by Scott Fitzgerald, which is, the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas and still retain the ability to function. You would start with this, and then you would come and affirm on this. Okay? Because it's not a usual case of tension. It's a tension between one good has to be picked up over the other good. So you need to be innovative and you need to be creative. Here again, just to give you a sense of two philosophers who come here. तो अभी इतना पता लग गया ना, innovative और creative होना है. किसको याद करना है? सबसे पहले एरिस्टोटल को. Aristotle, because he ranked practical wisdom over theoretical wisdom. Forensics over sophism. Okay, this guy. And then you remember the Michael Val. I'm forgetting the name. Michael Walzer. Michael Walzer, who again says that a leader who orders a difficult action to prevent a greater harm may have made the instrumentally correct decision, but a morally tainted one simultaneously. Okay, so your creativity here is that you had to take a call, but because you're a leader, you're okay with suffering with that moral guilt. That's it's a very kind of weird kind of creativity, but that is it, right? Some quotes which kind of helps prove the point here, that you have to take an action, which is a quote. One of them has come in the essay paper also, that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in times of great moral crisis choose to be silent. You can use that quote here. Another one, in any moment of decision, the worst thing you can do is nothing. This is Theodore Roosevelt. Okay. Indian example. You have Indian example of Harsh Mandar, who was an IAS, but he resigned, and he published he published his account of Gujarat riots, whatever was his account, and he had 15 more years of services left, but he resigned because he could not take it on his conscience. So you can use that. Indian equivalent of what Aristotle's practical wisdom, what he was saying, which is foreignness versus sophism, is called a word which is viveka. And vivek is your ability to discern. And you can use this word because what basically it does is that you know in a particular situation within the context what is the ideal thing to be done and what is the right thing to be done right now, as of now. So that is vivek. Again, if you do not have vivek, you default to your habits, right? So just to draw the contrast, you can use these liners. Cool, awesome. What we'll do is we've covered a very important chunk of basic first micro theme, which is ethics. Now we'll come to this second micro theme, which is all that we'll discuss today. When I discuss the other ones, I will put more emphasis on Indian case studies. One is attitude. So we'll discuss attitude from the schema of attitude cross practical intelligence, and then attitude cross persuasion and social influence. Okay. There's a very famous quote which goes that, in anything in life, what determines how higher you go is not your aptitude, but attitude. Another famous quote if you can use. But let's just use the thinkers over here. You will see as you complete different micro themes in the ethics that the thinkers and their quotes will almost be the same. It's just that sometimes you will get a wider context to apply them, sometimes you will get a narrow context. So your creativity would be to use the same thinker and put him in a different situation which suits your answer. अब एक सवाल देखते हैं एटीट्यूड का ही. हाँ, to achieve holistic development, a civil servant acts as an enabler and active facilitator of growth rather than a regulator. Okay, rather than a regulator means rather than his need to be present and micromanaging everything that's happening within his district or in his area of work. A much better trait or a much better expected quality of a leader is, or as a civil servant, is that he should be enabler and an active facilitator. And the person you should quote here to get a great intro is Lao Tzu. And he gave he said this very famous thing: a leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done and people will say, we did it ourselves. We're just paraphrasing what he said, but it's this kind of quote summarizes what your answer should start with. Then you have, in the enabling thing, then you have examples of Armstrong Palme, right? That he built this 100-kilometer road and he crowdfunded, gave his own salary as well. That became a very major thing in India back when it happened, right? And he became a facilitator. He somehow, with all these things, involved the whole society, made them feel like they're stakeholders in this thing. And the moment that happened, and his ideas were clear, they were easily understood by everyone, he used technology to its best use, built the road, gave his share, kind of made it feel like a win-win for everyone with their participation, right? Great example of attitude. Thinker profile mein, there's one thinker, Viktor Frankl, which everyone knows, okay, which talks about the freedom that exists. He says that you always have that freedom. If you're able to create that space between the stimulus and your response to it, that is the space where you have the freedom. That freedom no one can take away from you. You might still choose to react in the worst possible manner, but that's the freedom you have. Okay. But there's another famous American psychologist. He gave cognitive dissonance theory. अब इसको इसलिए पढ़ना है because whenever you have to comment that sometimes even the best speakers or the leaders who give all the right kind of speeches and have all the rules laid out, they still sometimes end up acting in a way which is not in consonance with or not in the right accordance with whatever they've said or written. That is where this cognitive dissonance theory comes. दो तरीके से देख सकते हैं. One is when a person's belief and behavior conflict. Okay, they experience psychological discomfort and then they are motivated to reduce it. Okay, so I am supposed to govern this particular project or this particular district in a particular way, which is what I believe in: constitution, rule of law, etc., etc. And my belief is there. But because of the ground realities, I am supposed to act in a different way. Okay, two things will happen: either I will resign, or I'll act in haste, or I will start rationalizing my. If I give into this side, if I give into the side of, let's say, bad, I'll try to rationalize whatever they are saying, that it's a long term benefit thing, vagera, 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 vagera. But if I still check in with my belief system, if I'm still not disassociating with that, then I will try to put in creative measures, innovative means to ensure that I am in the clear and I do what is right by my conscience. Okay. Now, this is where integrity comes in. This is the times when integrity gets tested. When everything is comfortable and right, when there is no dissonance, when there are no tensions to be resolved, then your integrity will never be challenged. But when such a thing arrives, and this is what this American psychologist said, that integrity is the consistent choice of behavior change over rationalization. Okay. When I see that this is what I believe in, but this is what my behavior is supposed to be if I'm supposed to survive in this situation, I have two options. Either I will rationalize. By rationalize, I mean in a negative connotation. Either I will say ki theek hai, chalta hai, this is the rule of the law, it's the conventional thing to be done here, or I'll stand for what I believe in, and this is where my integrity shines high. Okay, so this is where you bring in this psychologist whose name is Leon Festinger, and you can write the name. That integrity is the constant choice of behavior change over rationalization. Okay, again, Viktor Frankl can again be used, that the last of human freedom is to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance. Viktor Frankl, again, obviously turning toward this side, he says that do not rationalize if you feel it's wrong. Don't go for that. Do not let that cognitive dissonance attack your core belief systems. Go towards this side. That's the freedom you still have. There's another important and interesting case and interesting followers. Yeah, एक और पंडू फिलोसफर है, विलियम जेम्स. Now, William James said this. He is the founder of Pragmatism, School of Pragmatism School, I think, in US. And he said that an idea is true, and by true I mean an idea is meaningful, worthy to be followed, or good to be propagated, only if it is able to navigate the reality well. He's basically saying that, let's say you're a bureaucrat and there's a situation, and ideally it involves, let's say, 10 steps. But you know that, two things. You know that these are the most crucial steps. So you know what are the steps which are the worst case scenario things that you can never overlook. Also, you know the larger philosophy of why these steps are there. होता है ना कभी कभी that because you do not want the system to be broken by some kind of a technical hack or something, ये steps डाल दिए हैं, but उनका idea इसलिए कि trust ना break हो system में. ठीक है, जैसे कि for example, if I digitize all your records, and let's say there's a case where a COVID vaccine has to be given to someone who's marginalized, and he is not in this ecosystem, ठीक है, that doesn't mean I should not be giving it to him. So the pragmatic outlook would be, यार आप वो दे दो, and then find a workaround to get that person included in the system as a post facto thing, right? So this guy William James said that you have attention, which is a finite resource, and wisdom of a bureaucrat is to know where to put that attention. Okay, where do you allocate that attention? So he's not saying to short circuit the whole process just for the heck of it. He's saying you should know the philosophy or the fundamental of why that rule exists. You should also know the areas where the rule breaks, the linchpin areas, the key areas which have to be followed, come what may. Other than that, these are all details. Ye wala areas are just extra details. You can do them in a time of comfort, but do not let these things become the reason why you are not going to help a larger public, because then that would be not pragmatic. This is almost similar to when we ask you to study the micro themes. When we ask you to study micro themes of mains, what we are saying is not that the syllabus is junk. That's what UPSC has given to you. That's what we all know, but that's a very abstract syllabus. What we did was we understood the philosophy of UPSC, which is be analytical, be rigorous, go into the relevant depths, understand the dimension, etc., etc. And we realized what are the most recurring micro themes or themes where they're asking questions, which are these things. And we are saying if you're limited, if you're short on time, make sure these things are done. इसलिए मत वो सब्जेक्ट छोड़ो कि ये भी तो पूरा नहीं हुआ है. That would ensure that you do not qualify UPSC. That would not be the most pragmatic call. So William James is your philosopher. If you want to even navigate the reality of UPSC prep. Okay. Then there is another one who's called Robert Sternberg, who kind of rehashed the theory of Aristotle, which is more on the practical wisdom in a very new lingo. And he said there is a triarchic theory of intelligence. Okay, one is analytical, one is creative, and one is practical. Nothing, no big deal. वही जो एरिस्टोटल ने कहा था, इनफैक्ट बेटर है कि तुम एरिस्टोटल ही यूज कर लेना. वन इज एनालिटिकल, another is creative, and then you have practical. This is called the triarchic theory. Not too much of a fan of this, but you might use it. This is by Robert Sternberg. I have a very bad handwriting, but anyway. And one of the famous quotes of William James is, the art of being wise is the art of knowing what to overlook, which is what we said. Okay? And in the Indian example, in the Indian case studies, you have the same people figuring out, right? TN session. In fact, you will see here, anyone who's ever made any impact worthy of reading or rehashing in your exam paper are people who've synthesized these qualities, these ways of working in their, their jobs, in their style of impact. Now, we studied about something called as Vivek. In Sankhya philosophy in India, there is another term called Buddhi. And Buddhi means, almost the same thing. Sari philosophy mein thode naam interchange ho rakhe hain. Vivek is not in the Sankhya philosophy, I think. A weak Buddhi will follow the bureaucratic pathology. Ki nahi, I'll have to make sure everything goes by the T so that my behinds are covered. Okay. A sharper Buddhi will understand the philosophy, the fundamental of why that process was set up, and those guardrails. Jaise AI mein hota na, you have some guardrails which are there to ensure that things don't just go spiral off, right? That's it. A sharper Buddhi will act in accordance with the principles and some of these constraint areas. I'll finish this particular live on this note here. Saturday seems like a bad day to continue this, because next time when I come with the NYQ, and I'll try to do this either on Monday, not on Monday, we have a conclave going on, a UAP conclave going on Monday. When we do next, what we'll do is we'll pick up questions. We'll just have a laundry list of questions, and with each question we'll have a quote and one Indian example. In that Indian example, I'll either try to give a mythological example which proves the point, or I'll give an example as a case study of a particular bureaucrat who's done something good, or a leader from the past, right? And that's it. We'll float this out and we'll complete the whole ethics ke sare micro theme on quote, question, and example basis. Okay. The additional advantage that you might get that day is you might get some diagrammatic representation, which might not be possible for you to replicate this in the exam, but it'll helpful for you to internalize whatever we are saying. Okay. Have a good day. Thank you for joining in, and we'll see you soon.